obviously, that if that oil spill to appear on the wall like that, that's never. I've shown that to numerous experts in the field. They have never encountered anything like that.
Today I have Joshua from Phantom Detectives with me, and it's time we discuss ghost hunting. Joshua, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I look forward to coming in, obviously answering any questions from your end and from your listeners' end.
That's awesome. I love this. I love this. So first, I want to start out. What a typical day is like for you as a paranormal investigator slash ghost hunter. So if you're going to say someone contacts you and you're going to their business or residence, what is a typical day like? What's your typical investigation like from that perspective?
First, people will go to our website, phantomdetectives.org, and then they push the request help tab. And then obviously that takes you to a form on our sister website, darkmatternews.com. People fill out the form. And then what happens is it goes to our case manager, who's not here today, Melissa Ferrazano. She's our psychic medium case manager. And then she'll say, hey, guys, client A has a obviously, investigation. They are experiencing, dark shadows and seeing things and bangs and all that. So she gives like as much information about the form that was filled out to her. And then after that, our team member, Mr. Rick Warner, who's not here today, Rick is certified from MUFON. He's an expert at client interviews, so he can determine if a case is warranted taking on. So if the client is able to convince Rick that, hey, they got some legit paranormal activity, then we'll go ahead and pick a date, and Melissa will circle back to the client after Rick does the audio interview, obviously, and then what we'll say is, okay, we'll be here on X, Y, and Z date at this time. So once we have Melissa schedule, she's like the intake person. She takes the form, she gets the form, and then she also books the investigation and the date. And so after we set up, usually what we'll do is we'll get there like an hour or two early for the investigation, and then we'll set up all kinds of lots of equipment from EMF meters to dowsing rods to SLS cameras to DVR cameras to ghost boxes. I mean, the whole enchilada. So we'll motion sensor like REM pods. So usually what we'll normally do is we'll set up all kinds of equipment all over the business. So once we have everything, we'll go ahead and set all of our equipment up. That takes like an hour. Because factor in the DVR cameras, you have to place them certain ways. You have to knowing where the hot spots are of that venue. And once we set up all the cameras, and then we do a investigation, which usually takes about 5 to 6 hours, and lots of data because we're using the scientific method to create a hypothesis, develop it, and test it, and see if we get results. So that normally we'll start around like mid-afternoon and wrap up around 10 or 11 at night, and then be on the road, because that way we don't like to keep the the homeowner or the business owner staying up and waiting for us to finish up. So we're very respectful of their time. So usually the breakdown usually takes about like 30 minutes to an hour, and then the setup takes 30 minutes to an hour. So altogether, you're probably looking at about like probably 5 to 6 hours for an investigation, depending on the size of the venue. And then of course there's the evidence review process, which is like we have to check all the cameras, check all the audio recorders, and then after that, obviously once we check all that, then we'll go ahead and write a case report for the client. So obviously I'll write all the findings of what we found during the investigation, as well as share with them like what we captured from all of the different apparatuses that we use, and then post the results on our website. We'll never reveal the identity of a client, but we'll put like an abbreviation, maybe like DH, because we respect client confidentiality. We want to make sure, and then we check with the clients if it's okay to post what we captured on our website, and most of them always say yes. So we have a very specific process, from the intake process all the way down to the form, all the way down to the case report. So it makes things it helps things stay a lot structured too.
Now, what happens when you invest all this time and energy and you don't capture anything? Does that ever happen where like you might have to come out a second or third time? What's that like?
We have respect for the spirits. We also have respect for the business. We have never walked away empty-handed from an investigation. On 24 investigations now that we have done, we have captured at least 2 or 3 pieces of evidence every investigation. And I think that comes down to the approach that we have with the spirit world and the ghost world, is that we treat them like it's their home and their business. So when you say please and you please say thank you, obviously you're going to get results. A lot of times they'll show themselves in thermal camera images. Sometimes they'll show themselves like maybe through an EVP recorder, or through as a stick figure as an SLS camera, or obviously you might see like maybe like a piece of equipment going off. So obviously spirits show up in different forms, because the law of energy states energy cannot be created nor destroyed. But we have never gone away empty-handed, because I think it's the way that we don't use the Zach Bagans obviously approach on Ghost Adventures, like you do it to him, now do it to me. That's more for like entertainment and ratings. And I think it's kind of like WWE. It's got scripts and all that. So obviously we usually I say when you're humble and you're kind and you say please and thank you, and also try to keep an open mind with debunking. Like for example, I know the plumbers from Rotor Rooter, from the guys from Ghost Hunters, Jason and Grant, for a number of years. And usually with their backgrounds as plumbers, they would be able to tell if a faucet, like if someone's experiencing a water faucet turning on by itself, they can look at the pipelines and say, oh, there's a break here that's causing that obviously faucet to turn on by itself. So usually we haven't gone away empty-handed yet so far. Every time we've gotten, I think it's the way that we approach the investigation and the professionalism that we bring. But if there are points in time in the future when we do go to larger venues and we don't get nothing, we'll try to come back and maybe do a follow-up, maybe see if the client has any kind of new experiences, like while we didn't capture anything on that investigation, and then see if they have obviously anything new happen. So I think that's the best thing you can do, is instead of going there like 2 or 3 or 4 times, checking up with the client to see if anything new has developed is the best approach. That way you can kind of figure out like what's fact from what's fiction. That's something very important I think you need to do as an investigator.
That's awesome. So I really like how you mentioned that the idea of bringing in a plumber to investigate the pipes and the faucets. So
Right.
I actually had that thought. Do you ever bring in electricians to look for faulty wiring, or other professionals? And it sounds like you do that on an as needed basis, I assume, or do you have people that are part of your team that already have those specialties?
Exactly. So the nice thing about Rick is that he has worked with like as contracting, so he can like obviously tell like inside a house where, like for example, if we have like an electrical problem, or for example the light's turning on by itself. A lot of times with his background in contracting, he's an electrician. I think he has some skills in that he can pretty much tell if there's like a light bulb that could be a bad light bulb, or it could be a bad light switch, or maybe the wire is kind of messed up, it's turning on by itself. So it's kind of nice to have somebody with those kind of skill sets on our team. And then, of course, obviously, you got to factor in sometimes EMF meters can also like go off, obviously, in like insulation and electrical appliances. So you have to make sure you keep your EMF meters away from those areas, because it could create a false narrative. And sometimes, a lot of times, high EMF fields can also create hallucinations for our clients. Like clients might say, hey, we have something going on here. But a lot of time it's just overactive imagination when they're just seeing things and hearing things that just might be attributed to a high EMF field.
That's really, really fascinating. So sticking with that equipment for a second, how difficult is it for you to, or how difficult is it for a person to learn to use that equipment, like the EMF readers or those types of, or the different cameras? Is it something that's easy to pick up? Do you need specific training to do that? What's that like?
Sure. Actually, the really cool thing is we actually have paranormal investigator training courses. We're one of the only few teams out there that actually have them. We teach our students how to use EMF meters. We teach them how to use voice recorders. We teach them how to obviously properly conduct an SLS camera session, and how to properly use a voice recorder. Obviously, the learning curve, it all depends on the individual's ability to be willing to learn, and also be willing to obviously spend time actually learning tech. Obviously, tech has evolved over the last 20 years, so there's a lot more hands-on approach that you need to know. You need to know practically exactly what to look for. For example, when especially you're running the SLS camera, like which is called the structure light sensor. It uses the Xbox Connect technology, but you got to be very careful, because that camera can also create obviously like a stick figure, but obviously it's just simple as a water bottle or a chandelier hanging on the wall. So you got to know what you're looking for. That tech really takes time to learn. But obviously, I would say on average, it usually takes a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on like how much you're working with the equipment. Obviously, the more that you work with the equipment, the faster you're going to progress, and the better you're going to get with practice. So I would say usually a couple weeks to a couple months is usually if you can get a good knowledge base, and that's over a couple investigations, that you'll get a better understanding of what you did beforehand.
So let's go back to the beginning for you. How did you actually get started doing this? I'm assuming there's probably like a hobby, passion kind of thing that just kind of evolved. How did this begin?
Sure. So for me, like much like every person as a child, I think I originally got my start in the supernatural by watching a show called In Search of by Leonard Nimoy. And then, of course, Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack was, of course, one of my all-time favorites. I mean, the episode that really caught my attention when I was a 4-year-old child in 1988 was obviously the haunting of the General Wayne Inn in Marion Station, Pennsylvania. It's a place that's a lot of history. So the Unsolved Mysteries episode covered all of that, like where people would see Hessian soldiers at different points in the obviously the inn. They would also, a lot of the women reported like having someone blowing on their necks, and it wasn't they were blaming their husbands for it, but it wasn't them. Those are just kind of some of the strange phenomena that the inn covered. So obviously, as we got later on, I started researching the paranormal and reading every book I could by Dr. Hans Holzer. Dr. Holzer's books were an inspiration to so many of us in the field. In the 1990s, I remember listening as a kid. I heard this amazing voice on AM radio called Dreamland with Art Bell, and obviously being captivated by hearing his stories of like exorcisms with Malachi Martin and time travel. I started picking up every book I could by Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. So I was ingrained in this at an early age and just read, started just reading and reading. And right around the late 1990s, some of the ghost hunting shows started like appearing on television. You would see like Most Haunted with Yvette Fielding, which is kind of one of the first ones where she would go with her husband, Carl Beatty, and these different castles and stuff in Britain, which was always kind of really cool, like the Tower of London. And then you would also see 2008 Ghost Adventure. So all these shows started popping up on television. And I loved how, obviously, even though it's entertainment, I still enjoy the process of them going in, interviewing the clients, conducting the investigation, showing the results of the investigation, and then, they would go to a new location. So that was always interesting to me. So I went ahead in 2020, started forming Phantom Detectives. So I went ahead and said, I'm going to start creating my own organization. So we created business cards, we created social media pages, we started having a website developed from the ground up. I started building out a YouTube channel. And so the whole idea was I wanted to revolutionize paranormal investigating in the Philadelphia region, period, because I thought there was a lot of teams that were going by the wayside. Once we launched the website, we started doing investigations on the new banner, and we ended up doing our first pre-investigation at a place called the Selma Mansion with Brian J. Cano. Once we did our first investigation, like every year, it's gotten bigger and bigger.
You talked about you offer the courses online where people can learn to do what you're doing essentially.
Yes.
As part of that or separately from that, do you ever offer what I'm going to call walk-alongs, where if someone is like, they're very interested in this sort of thing, they maybe just want to have the experience, for instance. Do you ever offer that to people to do with your team?
We already have a paranormal tours page right on our website. The biggest challenge right now is finding locations that allow us to host public hunts. I know that's been like a lot of positive things that people have been asking to do. I think there's definitely a demand for it. We're looking to bring that out sometime next year when we roll into 2025. It's something I definitely want to do. And I think it just comes down to finding venues that will allow us to do it, and getting permission is very important, because that's one thing I have to say: never like trespass on private property. Make sure you abide by the owner's rules, and make sure that you go to locations that you have permission. And one thing I recommend is there's a really great website for haunted locations my friend Dave Giuliano developed back in the 90s called theshadowlands.net. That's all one word, theshadowlands.net. And you can just punch in your state, and then push your state, and then look in your counties and see like what haunted places are nearby your area. And then just Google search that business or that that venue, see if it still exists, and then obviously contact the business and see if you can do an investigation. It's very simple. Just call them up, and they'll usually get you in touch with like an events manager at that business, and a lot of times they'll say yes.
Before you talked about people contact you to investigate their businesses, their residences. Do they often pay you for that, or is it a free service? Do you have money coming in other ways? How does the financial end of this type of business typically work?
So what we're doing right now is obviously we do investigations free. So that's not going that's a not-for-profit side of things, because we want to help business owners, clone owners. Now, I will say, if we have to travel, like say for example, we have to go like out of state, like I don't know, like 300 miles or 200 miles away, we're going to at least request that the business owner or the homeowner obviously compensate us because of gas, because of hotel costs. I think that's a very fair thing if we have to travel far out of the area to help them with whatever paranormal activity is going on in their home or their business. At least we request some kind of donation. Like, remember, I have a GoFundMe set up now, so if they can just donate on the GoFundMe, I can just transfer the money from the GoFundMe into my bank account. That'll compensate. We can spread that among all three of our investigation team members. That way they have it. And so that'll be great. You're requesting a donation if we have to go out of state. The other thing that we have for monetization is the Paranormal Investigator training courses. It's a subscription system. And So far, I think we have like it's funny because I was kind of really nervous. Patreon, of course, I've been trying to work on getting people there. We haven't gotten people on Patreon yet, but Udemy is now almost up to 20 people now. Like I've been amazed to see it growing. And obviously, the nice thing is it's a subscription system, so you just pay a one-time fee, and you get all the paranormal investigator training courses, the best client interviews we did. You also get like the best thermal images, SLS images. You get all the dark matter news files that the newscast that Leo Ashcraft recorded for Art Bell. You get a great, amount of instruction video. And so far, instruction videos have been rated 5 out of 5 on Udemy. Once those grow and hopefully start getting more traffic rolling, and they should give us a lot of ways to like make money to help pay for some of our equipment costs and hotel costs.
Let me ask you this one. So, one of my podcasts I really love listening to is Jim Harold's Campfire. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all.
Oh, we've been on that before multiple times.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so one of the things he talks about sometimes are like the head scratchers, where it's like one story where it's like I don't know what this is. It is something weird, no explanation. In your investigations, what was the weirdest thing that you came across that you just could not come up with an explanation for?
Wow. So there are so many. Like, and I remember one time, if you're talking about a weird occurrence, so let's go back to one of our investigation back in 2022. I think there was a client named DH that was reporting demonic activity in this home. Obviously, where their children were frightened, they would see these dark shadows in this basement area. So they reached out to us and contacted us through our website. And then obviously I said, hey, this client DH is having paranormal activity in their home and their business. Then we did the investigation. So we had to literally bless ourselves, with sage and holy water before we went in. If there, we don't want something to attach itself to us before we go in and did it. And it was a terrifying investigation. We set up all the equipment in all the areas. And what's weird was we set up something called shadow trackers. Shadow trackers are basically like they light up and they point. The lights move in the direction, whatever the spirit is moving. If it's going north or if it's going south, it'll light up whatever way. We saw those things going off like crazy. And then we also used a thermal imaging camera, a point and click, which uses hot and cold signatures. And we captured a full body apparition in the corner of a room. And then we also, was weird was we also started setting up on the DVR cameras. I was able to pull some audio from the DVR cameras that we got cussed out. And we also got one that basically said, I want you to go. You could hear it. You could hear those EVPs on our website, phantomdetectives.org. And then what was really weird was later on the investigation. So Rick was I was right. Rick was just sitting in the chair in the basement, just trying to take a break, our lead investigator. And I remember I could see his eyes closing. You could feel the pressure on his chest. I just say the Lord's Prayer. The EMF meter, we have one of those 8+1 EMF meters, which goes up to like 200 milligauss. That thing was spiking up like crazy. And obviously I had to say the Lord's Prayer. But then once I said it, the EMF meters went down like that. That was pretty crazy. And then what was the weirdest thing about that investigation was later in the night when Rick and Melissa were running the SLS camera. Melissa was running it for me because I was upstairs, packing up the equipment that I had. And then what was weird was on the SLS camera, you can see these black oil spills. I've never seen it before and I've never seen it after. You can, obviously this was against a solid wall. You can see this like oil spill. This black oil spill change shape. It would go from like almost like an animal type thing to a human body. Then you could see it almost have like horns. Then you can see it like almost transform into like a dog. It was really weird. Obviously, that if that oil spill to appear on the wall like that, that's never. I've shown that to numerous experts in the field. They have never encountered anything like that using the SLS camera ever that I know of. So for that black oil spill to appear on the wall like that, I have no reasonable explanation why it happened. And it still like boggles me to this day. Like maybe that was a mistake in the mapping of the software or the firmware of the camera, or maybe there was something else going down there where some kind of demonic thing was changing shape and basically, as it was a shadow person, like into whatever it wanted to. But the nice thing is once we blessed the house, supposedly the homeowners like obviously felt immediately lifted from all that pressure of that investigation. Like they felt like the place was completely different after being blessed. So I think what those black oil spills are one of the weirdest things I've ever caught on the SLS camera.
Wow, that is awesome. And I love how you're very honest with yourself and you say, this could be a real thing. This could have really happened. This could have like how this changed, or it could have been something wrong with the camera. I love that perspective. I think that's really, really neat because you're kind of covering both sides. It's like, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. This could certainly be something supernatural. It could be something with the camera. We don't know. It's crazy. It's weird. I love that. I
Exactly.
absolutely love that. Joshua, from the other side of things, how can you think of an example where you went in thinking that there is something completely paranormal going on and you were able to debunk most or all of it? Can you give me like an example or two of something like that? You already mentioned like the faucet, for instance, but some other things that people might be interested in hearing.
Sure. So I've been to Penhurst many times over the last, like, obviously, 10, 5, 10 years since I've investigated. So Penhurst, of course, was a very haunted asylum. It's one of the most haunted places in all of America. I was in the Mayflower building with my former team member. At the time, we were doing one of those public hunts. Like, this is before we founded Fan Detectives. We were another organization at that time called Thin Line Paranormal. So obviously we were obviously in the Mayflower building, and then we started hearing these loud bangs. Like, then we found out there was a pipe that had busted off the wall, obviously, which was making a loud hissing sound, and then made a loud bang up coming up from another floor. It was like one floor above, like it was like a loose pipe that was set up on one of the walls that just fell off. So obviously it would be creating a loud hissing sound, make a loud by making that loud bang. So that's a good example of trying to debunk things, trying to understand like why something happens.
I was speaking with John Swift. He was a dream therapist I had on the show.
Okay.
And one of the stories he was talking about, he was treating a young child where she was having these night terrors. And
Okay.
after talking with the child, after talking with the mother, they came up with what they thought was really going on there. They came up with a solution. Night terrors went away. Awesome story. So that kind of leads me to this. So, how much of the time, or do you think it's possible that psychology plays a point in this where people believe that their house or residence might be haunted, but it's more once you come in and say debunk it or something, that just that having that perspective from an outsider telling them everything is okay makes it all okay.
Exactly. And I remember watching like some of the old episodes of like Paranormal State with Ryan Buell. And for example, there was this one client named Carol Ann who supposedly was experiencing paranormal activity, and she had all types of dozens of bags of EVP recorders. And then when Ryan had found out during this episode of Paranormal State that the client in New York named Carol Ann had obviously was having these experiences, they found out obviously all her dozens of tapes, and obviously it was basically the spirits were attached to her. It wasn't nothing else in the house that was haunting the house, and that's a great example of obviously the person itself is attached or maybe somehow obsessed with the paranormal. It's opened up a door for these spirits to pour into and possess this lady, or it's basically this lady just has a mental health issue where obviously something is attached to her. So there's a great example of that, your question right there, of basically it's not the the business itself, it's not the old building where they're seeing a ghost, it's the actual client themselves having the experience. And I think that's a great example.
From your experience, what was one of the coolest things that you saw that was just like, whoa, that was weird, that was really neat? Can you think of something that kind of got you that way?
Sure. And I like to go back to our beginning, one of our first ever investigations. And this is one of our best piece of evidence that we did back during there's a place called the Mill of Anselma. We did this investigation. So we set up all the equipment in all the different parts of this old mill. And what's interesting was we had a DVR camera on the door of this mill, and you can literally see this door is bolted shut, and me and my team were the only ones on the property. There was no wind, there was no rain at all. This door that was bolted shut flew open by itself. No reasonable explanation. Obviously, and mind you, this is one of those old 1700 style latches. This thing needs to be physically lifted up like this in order for it to open up. This latch flies open like this, and you can literally see some kind of spirit, or obviously like right near the bottom of the door, obviously this door flying open. And that's what's crazy is when that thing's bolted shut, like that completely surprised me, like holy heck. And I obviously my former team member was the one that captured this on the DVR camera, because at that time she was in charge of DVR review before she left the team. So I was like, holy heck, how did that happen? So I tried to debunk it. It's like, okay, maybe a draft pushed that door open. Well, obviously what was interesting was there was no wind, there was hardly any wind that night. Obviously there was no rain. We're the only ones on the property. Why did that happen? And it wasn't my team member obviously physically going up and obviously pushing the door up, because if there was like, if she was using like a string, like, you know, tied to a rope, I would have seen it on the camera and be able to immediately debunk it. But for that door to be bolted shut and fly open like that, no reasonable explanation. There's a great example of being surprised.
I love that. I love that. I absolutely do. I love a good ghost story. All these examples. This is fantastic. I love it.
I think what's awesome is I even have a video of this. You can put on the shoes this on the show, and obviously I'll send it to you. It's on our YouTube short section. You can just pull. I can give you the hyperlink, or boom. But it's a fantastic piece to that you could use and just show the video like of that flying open. I think people will be amazed and love it.
So when you first started doing this,
Yes.
obviously people have very strong opinions about supernatural. You know, you have like the people that are all about it. Yes, absolutely. And you have the people that are like, no, it's all in their head, you know, and then you
Right.
have some people that are in the middle. So when
Right.
you
Skeptic.
first, I'm sorry.
A skeptic.
Yes, yes. So when you first started doing this, how did your friends and family react to you that you were going to be a paranormal investigator or a ghost hunter?
The overall response that I got from first doing this was mostly positive, because a lot of my family have had paranormal experiences as when they were children, as well as obviously our psychic medium Melissa, who's also not with us today. She had experiences like she had to, you know, sleep with the light on. So the overall responses that I've gotten from the whole community since that we have founded and this organization has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger every year has been nothing but positive.
Now, in the very beginning of our show, you talked about working with someone from MUFON. How
Yes.
did how did that connection happen? Did you happen to meet that person, or did you seek them out? How did you get that person of expertise on your team or working with your team?
What happened was there was a guy on LinkedIn. Obviously, I think either he requested me or I requested him at that time. So his name was Mr. Rick Warner. And Rick, of course, was from MUFON. And I found out that he had originally been part of the Delaware MUFON organization. But then, fortunately, he didn't like where they were going with needed all these extra licenses and certifications. He was fully certified. He had all the certificates from MUFON. He created his own UFO organization around that time called Extraterrestrial Research Center. So he was also the U.S. ambassador to the Italian UFO Federation, FUI, and he's been in movies out in California. So he was very well known in the MUFON world. So I thought he'd be a great team member to bring in. So what he did was during that time, he brought himself his own couple. I invited him to come into the Fan Detectives talent pool and said, "Hey, why don't you come with us to the Betsy Ross house?" And there he made his debut investigation at the Betsy Ross house.
When it comes to doing your investigations, how often are you actually out and about? Is it kind of like once a month, a couple times a year, once a week? How often are you actually doing these investigations?
These are more for like extracurricular and fun. So usually we do the investigations, I'm going to say sometimes once every month or once every 2 months. It just depends on obviously what we have going on. For example, and we just did one in September at the Black Powder Tavern, and now we got to come back and do a lecture. So we're going to take October off and just focus on the two lectures, because we got to get like all of the PowerPoint together of everything that we captured. We got to get the publics, all of the equipment, the table set up, and obviously all of that. So we got two separate lectures coming up during that time. And so obviously, a lot of times it just depends on what we have going on.
That makes sense. I believe that because I mean, if you have several cameras and if you're doing a 5 hour, 6 hour session or something like that, to go back and review all that footage and really scrutinize it, I can see how that could be a huge time sink. So that makes complete sense.
Yes, definitely.
So you're going in people's houses, you're going in people's businesses. I'm assuming that you carry some kind of liability insurance. Is there kind of special insurance that people need to do this kind of work, or is it just general business liability?
Actually, the nice thing is we do have an LLC, but obviously in terms of a lot of these locations, we don't even bother with insurance, because to me it can be simple as a waiver. Like just sign a waiver, like which releases like the whole venue from obviously any liability, because we're on 24 investigations. Nobody's ever been injured. We're very close in the dark. Obviously, we investigate, but we also use flashlights like mag lights and stuff like that. We're very careful. Like we watch our footing. We don't trip. But a lot of times we just sign waivers. It's just so much easier instead of have to worry about insurance and all this other headaches.
That's awesome. That's really, really good information. One of the things I like to do in my show is identify any potential barriers that could prevent people from doing certain things. So knowing that, if someone wants to be a little more careful, they can get it, but they don't necessarily have to. A waiver could suffice in this situation. That's good to know.
Exactly.
You talked about all of that equipment that you have. So if someone is just starting out and they want to do this, what kind of How much money do they have to put out for equipment? Is this a few $100s, a few $1,000s, tens of thousands? What are they looking at if they just want to start out?
I think if you just want to start out, the nice thing is there's websites out there that sell professional equipment. So obviously there's one called GoStop.com. GoStop.com is a great website to buy, a lot of different equipment, from EMF meters to ghost boxes to voice recorders to, motion sensor devices like REM pods. GoStop.com has a kit, I believe, for as little as $150, which includes an EMF meter. It includes dowsing rods. It includes a voice recorder. I think it includes a ghost box. It's like a little kit that, you can buy these little kits for like little as like $125, $150. Now, if you start going to like, if you want to start going to like larger venues where you're going to need like DVR cameras and stuff, that's going to be an extra $300 or $400. If you want to set up like security cameras and all that, depending on how far you want to take it. Like if you just want to focus on like just going real basic to like public hunts with just a couple pieces, or if you want to go like crazy, the pricing can go anywhere from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000, depending on what you're looking for in equipment, because every person's going to be different. Some might like a device like the Oculus, which is like, uses the words to create EMF fields. That's going to cost you a nice, chunk of change. But if you use, like, you could buy a copy version of that for like $200 or $300 instead of paying $600, that'll be a savings right there. So it just depends. I mean, a lot of times you can just go buy the ghost hunting kits on the ghosthunterstore.com, which is Dave Giuliano's website, and ghoststop.com. There's plenty of, and there's also like local retailers on like Etsy as well that sell like kits and stuff you can buy. A lot of times between $125, $150, you can get your own kit and get started.
That's awesome. That's good to know. Again, a low barrier to entry. I love that. I absolutely love that.
One thing I recommend doing for people that are interested in starting out in this field, I think the best way for them to do is to get started is probably find find a paranormal society near you. Just finding a team in your area that hosts public hunts is a great way to get to know them.
That is really good information on how to get started. Joshua, this is the part of the show where I like to extend the courtesy to my guest. If there's something that you'd like to talk about, if there's a project you're working on, a cause you believe in, if you want to talk more about your business, I'd like to extend the offer and turn the floor over to you if there's something you'd like to discuss.
We're going to develop a new version of Camp Paranormal called Camp Hollow. What we're hoping to do with this is be able to find a venue out towards Gettysburg where we can have it set up. Imagine renting out a camp for the whole weekend, having guest speakers, telling ghost stories. We're working on developing this. So right now, I got the branding done, I got the logo done, I got the name done. Now I just got to continue to contact camps and hopefully find a camp that'll let us do this. The biggest thing is finding permission from an actual owner of a camp that'll let us do this. And once we have permission from an owner, we can rent out a weekend. We'll do this Camp Hollow, which I think will be very popular. They'll bring like guest speakers like Father Bob Bailey and his protege James Anito, and we might bring Heather Taddy and Katrina Wyman, who are part of Paranormal State, as guest speakers. So it's going to be something I think I plan on developing. I think that'll be really exciting. And then of course public tours. That's something that's already in the works. Obviously, I already found a location down in Delaware at the Marble Carriage Museum where we start doing public hunts. So those are exciting things coming up.
That is absolutely awesome. I'll make sure I get all the information. I'll put it on the website for you. I'll put it on the show notes for you. I'll share with everyone so that when people are looking for that information, they can easily find it for you.
Okay, so if you would like to reach psychic medium Autumn Melissa, our psychic medium, if you like a reading done, her website is psychicmediumautumn.com. If you want to reach Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer, his website is afterlifefrequency.com, the name of his first book. If you would like to reach Rick Warner, you need a UFO case investigated, or you have a question on UFOs, Mr. Warner's website is ERC2explore.com. For Holly Faust, our spiritual beliefs and our occult symbols expert, her website is all one word, hollyfaust.com. And for Dark Matter News, all one word, darkmatternews.com. And our main hub, phantomdetectives.org.
That is awesome. I'll put that on the website. That'll be in the show notes. That'll be all over the place. So when people are trying to find you, they can easily do that. Joshua, it's been absolutely awesome having you on Time to Discuss, and we learned what it's like to be a paranormal investigator.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you.